Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. In today's lesson, we'll learn how to compare people, places, or things in English using two special types of adjectives: comparative adjectives and superlative adjectives. But let's start with comparative adjectives. A comparative adjective helps us compare one noun to another noun. We form comparative adjectives in two different ways. We either add the suffix er to the end of the adjective, like with the words younger, faster, smarter, or we use the word more before the adjective, as in more popular, more careful, or more reliable. Now here's an important point. When making a comparative sentence, it's not enough to just use a comparative adjective. We also need to include the word than right after the adjective. This helps make the comparison between the two nouns clear. For example, your car is faster than mine. I am smarter than my friend. She is more popular than her sister. Sarah is more careful than Tom. Notice that whether we formed the comparative by using er or by adding the word more, the word than always follows the adjective. Now let's look at superlative adjectives. A superlative adjective tells us which person, object, or idea in a group of three or more has the highest or lowest degree of a certain quality. Like comparative adjectives, we form superlative adjectives in two different ways. We either add the suffix est, like youngest, fastest, smartest, or we use the word most, as in most popular, most careful, most reliable. The sentence structure for superlatives is also a little different. Unlike comparative adjectives, we don't use the word than. Instead, we place the word the or a possessive adjective right before the superlative adjective. For example, she is the smartest person in the room. Lisa is my youngest sister. He is their strongest player. She is our most reliable employee. Notice again that whichever form is used, the or a possessive adjective always comes before the superlative one. Now, one of the two most common mistakes that I see people make when using comparative or superlative sentences is forming double comparative or double superlative adjectives, such as more prettier or more luckiest. As we see in both examples, the adjective here includes both the comparative or superlative suffix and it's paired with the word more or most. This type of mistake has to do with a misunderstanding about how comparatives and superlatives are formed. We need a clear understanding of which adjectives take a comparative or superlative suffix versus which ones are paired with the word more or most, because an adjective only ever uses one or the other, and never both. So let's take a close look at the rules that we need to know. Now, knowing which rule to use to form a comparative or a superlative adjective depends mainly on how many syllables the adjective has. So before we continue, let's review how to identify the number of syllables in a word. Now, I'm not going to go through the syllable rules in this video, but I do want to share a simple technique for counting syllables that I like to use with my students. Now remember, each syllable has to have its own vowel sound, right? So an easy way to count them in a tactile way is to place 2 fingers just below your chin like this. Now, when we say the word, our chin will touch our fingers for each syllable. For example, let's say we want to count the number of syllables in the word beautiful. Well, we say the word out loud, beautiful, and count how many times our chin touched our fingers. So for beautiful, it touches beau, 1, two, full, 3 times, which tells us that beautiful has 3 syllables. Let's do the same thing again, this time using the word friendly. Friendly. This time, my chin touched my fingers 2 times, so I know that friendly has 2 syllables. So now that you know this technique, you can use it anytime you're unsure of how many syllables a word has. And now that we know how to count syllables, let's look at the rules for adjectives. For one-syllable adjectives, we always add ER to comparatives and EST to superlatives. For example, big, bigger, biggest, soon, sooner, soonest, cold, colder, coldest. We also add ER or EST to two-syllable adjectives that end in the letter Y. For example, the adjective happy, happy, happier, happiest, funny, funnier, funniest, silly, sillier, silliest. Now, unlike some of the other rules that we'll be looking at, which are more flexible and depend more on situation and context, this rule doesn't change. ER or EST is always added to one-syllable adjectives or two-syllable adjectives that end in the letter Y. Now, before we continue, there are a few spelling rules that we need to keep in mind when adding ER or EST, especially regarding changes to the final letter of the adjective. First, if the adjective ends in the letter E like the word large does, then we need to remove the E before adding ER or EST. Let's practice writing the word largest out loud. So L-A-R-G-E plus ER becomes L-A-R-G, remove the E, E-R, larger. Other examples that follow this rule include safe, safer, wise, wiser, and nice, nicer. Next, if the adjective ends with a consonant-vowel-consonant pattern, like how the adjective thin does, right? So we have a consonant H, then a vowel I, then another consonant N. So if the word ends in this CVC pattern, then we need to double the final consonant before adding ER or EST. So let's practice this rule and write out loud again using the word thinnest this time. So THIN plus EST becomes THI double N EST, thinnest. Other examples that use this rule include biggest, hottest, and fattest. Finally, if the adjective ends in Y like the word noisy, we replace the Y with I, then add ER or EST. So let's practice by writing out loud one more time using the word noisier. N-O-I-S-Y plus ER becomes N-O-I-S. Replace the Y with I, ER, noisier. This rule also applies to adjectives like easier, prettier, and angrier. Can you think of any other words that might use these spelling changes? If so, add them in the comment section down below. Now that we have the spelling down, let's move to our next rule. For two-syllable adjectives that end in ly, ow, or le, such as early, friendly, narrow, shallow, or gentle, or simple, we mostly use er for a comparative and est for a superlative. Friendly, friendlier, friendliest. Narrow, narrower, narrowest. Simple, simpler, simplest. She found the simplest way to solve the problem. My new manager is friendlier than the old one. This path is narrower than the one we hiked yesterday. Now, even though ER in EST is much more common, there are occasions where we use more or most with these types of two-syllable adjectives, particularly if we want to put an extra emphasis on the comparison. For example, let's look at these sentences again. Both are comparing two nouns. My new manager with my old manager, and the path we were on today versus the path we were on yesterday. Now, if I wanted to add an extra emphasis on the difference between the two nouns being compared, I would use more instead of ER, and that would sound something like this. My new manager is much more friendly than the old one. The path we hiked yesterday was narrow, but this one is more narrow. Now remember, this type of use doesn't apply to all two-syllable adjectives, only those ending in ly, ow, or le. The previous rule applied to two-syllable adjectives that ended in certain letter combinations, but this next rule covers adjectives that end in the sounds t, t, or Some adjectives that fall into this category include stupid or tepid, quiet or polite, awesome or handsome, and common or certain. Notice too that polite, awesome, and handsome all end with the letter E. However, that E is silent, so those adjectives are still included in this category because, remember, we're considering the final sound in the word, not the final letter. Now, there are two ways that comparatives and superlatives are formed with these adjectives. The most common and most grammatically correct way is to pair them with more or most. For example, more polite, most polite. More certain, most certain. More handsome, most handsome. I'm more certain than ever that this is the right decision. However, in informal speech, people sometimes opt for using ER and EST instead. Stupider, stupidest. Quieter, quietest. Commoner, commonest. This is the quietest spot in the whole cafe. Let's sit here. So while you'll most often use more and most with these adjectives, there are some rare occasions where ER and EST are also acceptable if used informally. Our final category includes adjectives with 3 or more syllables, as well as all the other two-syllable adjectives that we haven't covered yet, meaning any two-syllable adjective that doesn't end with the letters ly, ow, le, or y, or have the final d, t, or n sound. For these adjectives, we only use more for comparatives and most for superlatives. This restaurant is more expensive than the one we went to last week. She is the most beautiful person I've ever met. The movie was more interesting than I thought it would be. That was the most helpful advice I've ever received. I know some of you like having everything organized in one place, so here is a quick summary of the rules we've covered today for forming comparative and superlative adjectives. Feel free to take a screenshot or even create your own summary chart. It's a great way to keep this info handy as you practice and get more comfortable with comparatives and superlatives. I really hope today's lesson has been helpful, and if you haven't already, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel. It really helps these videos reach more people who might be looking for a little extra help with their learning. Anyways, thanks for watching today's video. I'll see you in the next one.